Listening, fill in the blanks.
Let's start.
Further excavations revealed stray pieces of timber and an iron gun, but the climax to the operation came when, on the 5th of May 1971, part of the ship's frame was uncovered. McKee and his team now knew for certain that they had found the wreck, but were as yet unaware that it also housed a treasure trove of beautifully preserved artifacts. Interest carried in the project grew, and in 1979, the Mary Rose Trust was formed, with Prince Charles as its president, and Dr. Margaret Rule its archaeological director. The decision whether or not to salvage the wreck was not an easy one, although an excavation in 1978 had shown that it might be possible to raise the hull, while the original aim was to raise the hull if at all feasible.
It was only when the hull was hanging freely from the lifting frame, clear of the seabed and the suction effect of the surrounding mud, that the salvage operation progressed to the second stage. In this stage, the lifting frame was fixed to a hook attached to a crane, and the hull was lifted completely clear of the seabed and transferred underwater into the lifting cradle. This required precise positioning to locate the legs into the stabbing guides of the lifting cradle. The lifting cradle was designed to fit the hull using archaeological survey drawings, and was fitted with air bags to provide additional cushioning for the hull's delicate timber framework.
The two world wars, which interrupted the supply of raw material from Japan, also stifled the European silk industry. After the Second World War, Japan's silk production was restored, with improved production and quality of raw silk. Japan was to remain the world's biggest producer of raw silk, and practically the only major exporter of raw silk, until the 1970s. However, in more recent decades, China has gradually recaptured its position as the world's biggest producer and exporter of raw silk and silk yarn. Today, around 125,000 metric tons of silk are produced in the world, and almost two-thirds of that production takes place in China.
Unique to the region, stepwells are often architecturally complex and vary widely in size and shape. During their heyday, they were places of gathering, of leisure, of relaxation and of worship for villagers of all but the lowest castes. Most stepwells are found dotted around the desert areas of Gujarat, where they are called Vav, and Rajasthan, where they are known as Bauri, while a few also survive in Delhi. Some were located in or near villages as public spaces for the community, others were positioned beside roads as resting places for travelers.
Competition between the two continued for about 2 years, but all the while, the Bell Company was mounting a legal challenge to Western Union, claiming it held the only true basic patents for the telephone. It based its claim on the fact that Bell had beaten Gray to the patent office, and so should be the sole recognized inventor of the telephone. Eventually, Western Union had to agree with Bell and gave up its telephone rights and patents to the Bell Company. The telephone company's entire network of telephones was handed over to the Bell Company. As compensation, Western Union was given 20% of revenue from rental of its former equipment. This arrangement was to last until Bell's patents expired. In an effort to fight the power the Bell Company enjoyed from exclusive rights to Bell's patents, a small telephone company, Pacific Union, established telephone services in the 1920s and 1930s that it claimed were based on the telephone design of Philips Rees. They maintained that because Rice's invention predated Bell 1S, the Bell design was not the first of its kind and, therefore, Bell's patents were not valid. Although the court accepted that the company may have been using Rice technology, it nonetheless held that only Bell's patents could legally be used. Ants store food, repel attackers and use chemical signals to contact one another in case of attack. Such chemical communication can be compared to the human use of visual and auditory channels, as in religious chants, advertising images and jingles, political slogans and martial music, to arouse and propagate moods and attitudes. The biologist Lewis Thomas wrote ants are so much like human beings as to be an embarrassment. They farm fungi, raise aphids as livestock, launch armies to war, use chemical sprays to alarm and confuse enemies, capture slaves, engage in child labor, exchange information ceaselessly. They do everything but watch television.
Returning to the South to become pastor of a Baptist church in Montgomery, Alabama, King first achieved national renown when he helped mobilize the black boycott of the Montgomery bus system in 1955. This was organized after Rosa Parks, a black woman, refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white man. In the segregated South, black people could only sit at the back of the bus. The 382-day boycott led the bus company to change its regulations, and the Supreme Court declared such segregation unconstitutional.
The discovery that language can be a barrier to communication is quickly made by all who travel, study, govern or sell. Whether the activity is tourism, research, government, policing, business, or data dissemination, the lack of a common language can severely impede progress, or can halt it altogether. Common language here usually means a foreign language, but the same point applies in principle to any encounter with unfamiliar dialects, or styles within a single language. They don't talk the same language, has a major metaphorical meaning alongside its literal one. Last year, a global consortium of scientists led by Frisson announced plans to sequence the banana genome within 5 years. It would be the first edible fruit to be sequenced. Well, almost edible. The group will actually be sequencing inedible wild bananas from East Asia because many of these are resistant to black sigatoka. If they can pinpoint the genes that help these wild varieties to resist black sigatoka, the protective genes could be introduced into laboratory tissue cultures of cells from edible varieties. These could then be propagated into new disease-resistant plants and passed on to farmers.
Like, share, subscribe the channel, and press the bell icon for further updates.